we are now being introduced in Asian Qualitative, the Research Association. Okay, thank you, Doc. Hello. Okay. I cannot open my video. Is it okay? Okay. Okay. So, good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, AQRA, for inviting me in, particularly to Dr. Arceli, the President of AQRA, to all our participants around the globe. Thank you for joining us, and I want to share with you this experience, this research experience among participants from Region 3. So the title of my presentation, of the research presentation, is Nemo, Quod, Habet, or you cannot give anything you don't have, the lived experiences of teachers teaching practical research. So, Republic Act number 10533 is very familiar to basic education teachers and students in the Philippines because this is the Enhanced Basic Education Act of 2013, also known as the K-12 Education Curriculum. This Republic Act emphasizes the inclusion of senior high school in the curriculum, making it a K-12. This law aims to address the poor quality of basic education of the present educational setup as a result of the low achievement scores of the Filipino and the diminishing employment rate, according to LIM in 2014. DepEd Order number 3, which is also hiring guidelines for senior high school positions effective school year 2016-2017. So this study this study is actually based on that Republic Act that emphasizes the importance of and the adoption of the K-12 education in the Philippines. And DepEd Order number 3 gives us the guidelines on who and how to hire teachers. And unfortunately, based on the initial needs assessment of the researcher, that based from those 20 schools in the select schools in Region 3, teachers handling subjects in research expressed their lack of expertise or no experience on teaching the subject. So that is where the problem lies. So therefore, the statement of the problem is teachers handling practical research subjects lack the expertise and experience in delivering the subject to senior high school students. So this is our problem. Therefore, the purpose of the study using phenomenological approach will try to explore the lived experiences of senior high school teachers teaching practical research subjects in select schools in Region 3 or Central Luzon in the Philippines. This study also will give recommendation as to address the needs of the teachers handling research subjects. This research is based from our theoretical framework, particularly on the K-12 curriculum or the Republic Act 10533. Also, from this act, emphasizing the fire or the fourth industrial revolution in education that highlights the importance of the 21st century skills for us educators in the basic ed and even in the higher education. We call this the forces or critical thinking, creativity, collaboration, and communication, which is actually one of the competency expected from practical research subject. And of course, research productivity, which is expected from teachers and students, particularly in senior high school. For our research design, the researcher adopted phenomenological study which focus on the commonality of lived experiences within a particular group. And in this group, in this study, refers to the practical research teacher. The goal of phenomenology, according to Creswell, is to arrive at a description of a nature of particular phenomenon. In this case, the needs of the senior high school teachers handling practical research subject. In particular, the researcher adopted the transcendental phenomenology, which according to Mustakas, it is a kind of phenomenology that is less on interpretation of experiences. Rather, it focuses on the description of the experiences of the participants. This is in contrast to hermeneutical phenomenology. This study, as mentioned earlier, was actually conducted in Central Luzon. If you are looking at the map, Central Luzon is at the center or the central part of Luzon or Region 3. So it is an administrative division of or the region of the Republic of the Philippines, primarily served to organize 7 provinces of the vast central plain of the island of Luzon, the largest island for the administrative convenience. So, for our sampling and procedure, this study had 10 teacher participants who are actually handling practical research subject. So they are either handling practical research 1, which is qualitative research, and practical research 2 for quantitative research. So this is one of our criteria in selecting our participants. So they must be handling practical research subject for at least a semester that allows them to have an experience of teaching the subject to grade 11 and grade 12 students. And also, not written any graduate school research or school action research as the need of the study in order to stick to the objective of our study. So the sample or the participants were purposefully selected. So both of them were able to meet our criteria. And they have also the expertise of the topic, which is their experience in handling subjects. And lastly, they are willing to share truthfully their experiences. So this purposive sampling mechanism is actually forwarded by Wambaleka and Gladstone 2018, who is also from IAS. Although Dr. Wambaleka is now in Africa. So the data was collected through a semi-structured interview using the interview guide. So these teachers who were actually within Central Luzon were asked if they are willing to participate in the study. They are also given the chance to read the purpose of the study and to raise other questions. After consent was uh, achieved by the researcher, each participant were actually given a maximum of 30 minutes to share their experiences based on our interview guide. So, for our thematic analysis, so how did the researcher analyze the lived experiences of our researcher? So, the thematic analysis that we have adopted is actually an inductive in nature. So, as a prerequisite, it includes the data on the lived experiences, in this case, gathered through an interview. From this interview transcript, themes were derived from the analysis that are data-driven. Okay, in this case, the experiences of our participants. So, it begins with a search for meaning and goes on with different meaning being identified and related to each other. So, as the researchers started to understand the experiences, so it's also try to find meaning in all these experiences and try to compare the meaning of these experiences to the experiences of other participants. So this analysis is aimed to try to understand the complexity of the meaning in the experiences in the data rather than to measure the frequency, which is the task of quantitative research. It also involves researchers engaging in the data and the analysis. So as the researcher tries to interpret or shall I say to understand the experiences, the researcher also tried to engage with this data and in the analysis process, knowing that in qualitative research, the researcher is the main instrument of the study. So the analysis contains a search for patterns of meaning being further explored and determining how such patterns can be organized into themes. That's why the study adopted a thematic analysis. Although there are other ways of analyzing data in phenomenological study, Wambalika for one also introduced 10 steps in understanding or in analyzing data, particularly on phenomenological study. And of course, thematic analysis should be guided by openness. So, this is one of the reminder that is being shared to the participants that they are encouraged to be open as to their experiences so that the researcher must can capture the totality of their experience. It also involved a reflective process designed to illuminate the meaning. So in order to understand, to give proper description to the meaning, so it involves reflective process, particularly from the side of the researcher. So in analyzing the data, the researcher uses the Colysis method. So according to Weirihana et al. In 2018, Colysis phenomenological methodology can be used reliably to understand people's experiences. Although, as mentioned earlier, there are other ways and strategies and methods in analyzing phenomenological data. So the first step is to read and reread the description. So to acquire the general feeling of the experiences. That is why it is reflective and it is iterative. So in order for the researcher to really capture the experience of the participants, he must be able to go back to the transcript, to the experience of the participants. Then after that, the researcher extracts significant statements to generate information pertaining directly to phenomenon being studied. In this case, the experiences of teachers handling or teaching practical research subjects. Third is formulating meaning. So after you extract significant statements, the researcher tries to formulate meanings in order to illuminate hidden meaning in various contexts of phenomenon, in the different phenomenon being presented by the participants. Fourth, categorizing into cluster of themes and validating with original text. So after the the researcher identified the significant meaning and these particular statements that the researcher tried to put them together into categories, into clusters, and then try to compare that again to the original statements, to the original experience that makes it again an iterative process. Describing, okay, to generate a prototype of a theoretical model, returning to the participants, this is actually part of my reliability or reflexivity of my study, wherein the data, the themes that being gathered, being analyzed, were actually returned to the participants to validate the findings. And incorporating any changes based on that member checking on the informant's feedback in order to present a theoretical model that comprehensively reflects the universal features of the phenomenon. So for the trustworthiness of the study, so in order to establish the trustworthiness of the study, the following criteria was actually followed. So we have in this table, you could see there are 4 criteria, and there is also the strategy and the description how it was applied in the study. The first criteria is credibility. How did the study establish the credibility of this research? So among the many ways to establish credibility, the researcher used the member checking, the one I told you earlier. So after the themes were organized, these were actually returned to the participants to give comments and to give confirmation and affirmation. So that is feeding back the data, analytical categories, interpretations, and conclusions to members of those groups from whom the data were originally obtained, which actually tries to strengthen the data. The second criteria is transferability. Okay, for transferability, what the researcher did is thick description. Thick description pertains to describing the behavior and experiences of the participants according to the context of the experience. The third criteria is dependability and confirmability. Here, the researcher used an audit trail. For most of us who are doing studies in qualitative research, we have a form of diaries or notebooks. So where we try to narrate and chronicle the experiences, the every steps that we do in our study. So audit trail pertains to transparently describing the research steps taken from the start of the research project to the development and reporting of the findings. So it's basically a chronicle of the research process, methodology, and insights, no? Just like the memos that we do in grounded theory. And so it pertains to the records of the research path which are kept throughout the study, because from time to time, it is where the researcher would get insights to understand better the description of the experience. And lastly, reflexivity. Reflexivity is through a diary. So examining one's own conceptual lens, explicit and implicit assumptions, and preconceptions and values, and how this affect research decisions in all phases of qualitative studies. As much as we know that in phenomenology, we are familiar with epoche or the bracketing that we need to do in doing studies so as not to influence the result of the study. But Wambaleka would always remind us that as much as we try to bracket, we also have to be honest with our own biases. That is why sometimes you only have to identify and indicate this bias in your study, so that those who are reading your study will know where you are coming from, and they can also determine if you have actually some kind of contamination or influence on the original concepts in your study. So that's it for our criteria or for our trustworthiness. Now, for ethical consideration, participants were actually being told as they accept, as they give their consent, that all the data or the transcript and of the interview and even the audio recordings will be kept confidential, and they will be destroyed in proper time after all the study culminates. And anonymity, so the participants will not be named. That is why the researcher tried to use codes in order to identify the experiences of each participant. As I mentioned earlier, since they are teachers teaching research, the researcher asked consent from these participants as to participation in the study. So here is it. So what came out of my study? So I'm presenting you now the findings of my study. So this is now the framework that was that came out after the analysis. So if you see here, the bigger circle, that is actually what we are looking at. Okay, the practical research subjects, particularly the experiences of teachers handling practical research subjects. The inner circle, which is in green, pertains to the critical thinking skill that directly practical research is expected to produce, or the competency. And of course, all of this is under the 21st century skills of the K-12 curriculum, or Republic Act 10533. So, based on the interview and the analysis, the researcher was able to came out to come up with the following experiences, phenomenon, or challenges, which serves as the theme of the study. The first is the low aptitude among students. So this later on I will be elaborating this. Then lack of motivation among students in practical research, limited resources from the teachers, and lack of expertise from the participants handling research. And the coping mechanism that they adopted because of these experiences is they tried to seek mentoring from those who've been handling research subjects already. They tried to be resourceful because of the scarcity of resources. They tried to be resourceful in trying to find other means to compensate what is missing. Then time management. They try to manage their time in order to maximize other ways to produce a better output for students. And professional development, because they know that they need to capacitate themselves. No, they try to enroll in graduate studies, and just like these webinars and conferences, in order for them to have time in order to capacitate themselves and enhance their expertise. So again, for the low aptitude of the students, based on the results of the study, the participants identified students who have a hard time constructing their outputs, particularly in writing research proposal. So that's where low aptitude of the students came from. So students have a hard time constructing. So according to the teachers, students actually have a hard time particularly in English construction. Okay? Also, lack of motivation. Students fail to pass the requirements on time. Okay, they don't pass as required by the teachers. Sometimes the teacher has to do an extra mile, no, to go an extra mile to help the students who are lacking of motivation. Also, limited resources, because particularly in public schools, library is actually very scarce, no, and practical research subject, when the study was conducted last year, there were only limited textbooks for practical research. So teachers have to download from online resources or open sources links in order to have other means of producing a good teaching and learning activities for the students. And of course, the lack of expertise of the teacher. So majority of the teacher participants said that they have a hard time teaching, and maybe this later on I could see that could have actually influenced the other factors, while the students cannot be more apt in submitting, the students have lack of motivation, might also be influenced by this other factor because they know that their teacher also lack the expertise on teaching the subject. So what they did, because realizing this limitation, so the teachers tried to look for mentors who are good or who are experienced in doing research, who've been teaching research for a long time. And they even go to other universities. No, they go to their mentors in the graduate school to review them on teaching practical research to their students. Also resourcefulness, as I mentioned earlier, they try to make use of online resources in order to compensate the scarce resources in school. Also time management, because they lack the expertise, they try to manage their time in order to find time to do these other things aside from their daily routine in school and at home. And of course, professional development. Many of the participants mentioned that they try to capacitate themselves by attending seminars, by enrolling in graduate school, by in order to enhance their research skills so as to teach the practical research to students. So all in all, the experiences, that the essence of the experience that the researcher found out is actually what I put in the title. Nemo that could non habet. You cannot give what you don't have. So the teachers who'd been teaching for a semester, for a year, actually had a lot of struggles in teaching, particularly on statistics, on the technicalities of research. And some of them, when they are asked, where do you think this problem is coming from? They said, I think it's because there is also lack of expertise from our end. That is why even from themselves, they started, they have their own sentiments. Because they were asked to teach, even though they are actually not supposed to teach the subjects. Most of the time, it's because they lack a load. Okay, and in order for them not to be under load, they were given a subject, which is research, in order for them to have a full load. So the teacher, so practical research now becomes a compromise subject for other schools. So that teachers who are handling practical research are not actually researchers themselves. So some of them have not even written research. But because of this, now if you try to look all these experiences, it all boils down to this essence. So, Nemo that could non habet, a teacher who lacks experiences, who doesn't have the research skill, could hardly teach properly. And eventually, maybe that is where the other problem comes in. Why the student is not motivated? Because maybe the student perceive that the teacher is not expert of the subject. The teacher cannot teach properly. Okay? So, the lack of teacher's competence necessary to deliver the lesson is crucial and sometimes detrimental in attaining the expected learning competencies and outcome. Later on, if you try to connect it to the teachers, no, in the basic education, we have the Basic Education Research Agenda, which is also patterned from another Republic Act, which says that all initiative in school should be a byproduct of research. Also, that's also where the product of the students, okay, the innovation of students should come from their research. But because they are not properly trained, because of the lack of experiences of teachers, the school, the students, and the teachers suffer from this lack of expertise. So to guide the students properly in the concepts and dynamics of a research, the teacher should have required experience and cognitive skills. So research is, of course, an art, but it's also a science. So not all teachers can teach research. Why? Because there are some jargons, there are some particular skills. So thank you for AQRA for having webinars, trainings to enhance research, particularly qualitative research, which is on practical research one, particularly to teachers. Maybe this would explain why there is the hunger for quality research. There's a hunger for research because now there are teachers who are asked to teach practical research who themselves lack the experience of research. So this study showed that a participant identified lack of expertise in the field as one of the challenges of teachers of research, which eventually the center of our study. So Bagtas et al., Kapilitan and Sequenti in 2015 said that teachers handling the subjects beyond their expertise will only rely on their own comprehension. And if their comprehension is only based on not related to research knowledge, more likely there is the scarcity, okay, there is a shortage of research skill that is also being delivered to students. So, Eric A. Mail and Plogman in 2018 said they proved that mentoring teachers can help them enhance their skills that can impact in the performance of their learners. So, that is actually my bias is coming from. No, since I am a research coordinator of about 20 schools, knowing this study, what we did now is an annual capacity building to our teachers who are master teachers first, who are in charge of research in schools, and other teachers handling research. So the researchers went to school, from school to school, in order to capacitate teachers in writing and teaching research. So in conclusion, and later on our recommendation, teaching practical research subjects needs an expertise of teachers, may it be practical research 1 or practical research 2, in order to provide the expected outcome. And what is the expected outcome? The competency of the 21st century skills needed by students in the 4th Industrial Revolution in education. Findings of the study therefore suggest that teaching practical research in senior high school in the desire to develop critical thinking skills of students should be given more attention, particularly by those doing the teaching loads by the administration and also those people in charge of teachers' development program. Teachers, especially those handling subjects with less expertise, should be provided with more enhanced capacity buildings and training in order to compensate the competencies required by the subject. And I think I mentioned that already earlier. So, school leaders, especially those assigned in the promotion and development of schools and even division research culture, should be more creative in providing challenges encountered by the teachers handling research subject. That is why the schools division office, the regional office, and even central office, both in basic and higher education, would try now to enhance their research productivity, their research culture, in order to capacitate teachers and eventually enlighten and empower students to become also young researchers and young scientists. Students' motivation and low aptitude necessary in conducting research study should be addressed by providing some technical skills, an enhancement program for technical writing and oral communication skills. So this is one of the observations that we had, that students in senior high school have a hard time writing their research proposal. First, because they have a hard time writing correct and quality sentences. So since the study was limited only to a particular cluster, it is recommended that it will be adapted to the whole school and eventually to the whole division and to the whole of Region 3, based from the basic education research agenda. So, once again, thank you very much. And the following are my references for this study. Okay. So, thank you very much. I hope I was able to share. Okay, Doc. Yes, Dr. Doc. Okay. Thank you, Dr. Arceli. Thank you, Doc, for the question. So, um, again, the study adopted transcendental phenomenology as mentioned by Mustaka. Sorry, transcendental phenomenology is adopted if the study would only focus on the description of the lived experiences of the student of the participants. So, in order to follow this, the researcher would only relied on the sharing, on the lived experiences of the participants, and try to describe based on their own experiences. And they are, as compared to the hermeneutical studies that focuses more on the interpretation of the study, the study focuses more on the description for one reason, maybe because of the time being allotted for the study. The study is only given about 3 months to be conducted. This is actually a part of a graduate study course, and it was produced. That is why this was co-authored by Dr. Arnil Sikat of the University of the Assumption. Doc. As to the textural description, the researcher was able to only describe at a certain point those experiences of the participants, but the one of the limitation of this study was it was not made into the finality towards the last part because of the lack of time. But the framework that we were presented were at least try to capture what we had, what the most that we had. No, we try to summarize those experiences from the transcript and converted that into the way it can be properly described as a way of our textual presentation of the experiences. Okay. For the case of this study, the first batch of interviewing was actually done face to face during one of our sessions, because these people were actually within the cluster. The second part was only more of a follow up through online. It was not indicated, but I think the last part that we met was more on the forum, that it's more of a form of a focus group discussion when the researcher, who happens to be the research coordinator of the cluster, try to give some clarificatory questions as to some experiences being shared before I finalize my themes and later on presented to them the data. So it was not of the same mode of gathering the data, but it was actually more of the shall I say, my other way of triangulating the data. But it was not so extensive because of the scarcity of time. But the good thing is, during the member checking, my participants actually give me a thumbs up and said that the themes that we were able to present to them captured their experiences, particularly during that time. That's actually a year before the pandemic, when there's actually the scarcity of resources and the scarcity of expertise from teachers who are handling the subject. Actually, Doc, that was actually one of the challenges that I was trying to face during the time when I was trying to adapt which data analysis I am going to follow. But then because the researcher admits that there's a little bit of complexity in the process of mustaka, so he decided to use colysis because that's easier to to use for the participants, and also based on the citation that we have, that it can also capture the same lived experiences, although it cannot be that as extensive as the framework being proposed by Mustakas. Yeah. Basically, the the researchers' first challenge was that this is the first time that the researcher conducted a particular study. The phenomenology, we've been using a simple case study, uh, research of qualitative and grounded theory, and also another one is the hesitation. This is on the data gathering that I encountered. Participants had an initial hesitation of participating because they might be it might be used against them by the school concerned, because it might be taken as for them complaining of them being given a load which are not of their expertise, but because of our desire to convince them that we will try to hold everything confidential, and that the study will benefit not only themselves but also eventually the school, because after some time actually this was also presented to the LAC session of the school. So the teachers handling research, actually the school heads was there, and they realized that indeed these are very important issue to be addressed, that practical research is not only an add-on subject, but practical research as research per se should be given teachers who are really qualified in handling the subject. So I think, Doc, these are some of the challenges that the researcher encountered. Thank you, Doc, for the insight. Okay. Thank you, Dr. Dog. So basically, the questions were only limited to three important main questions, although there were some follow-up research questions. The first question that I raised to them, because they'd been handling research for a semester, although some of them had been there for 2 years, was the first question was, what are the best practices that they have as a research teacher? And the second question are, what are the challenges that they encountered in teaching practical research subject? And the last question was on what are the coping mechanism that they apply, that they use as a researcher, as a teacher, in order to teach the subject. And I think these three questions captured the essence or the experiences that I want to have, because the end product that I was thinking during that time was to make recommendation as a research coordinator to the school and to the cluster as to enhancing research culture and productivity. Doc. Okay. Writing of the thank you, Ma'am Chona, for that question. Writing of the findings were actually not so different from the case study findings, because in this case I was using the thematic analysis when I do my data analysis. only that the focus in trying to discuss case study is on more on the descriptive manner in trying to discuss the findings, which are basically the challenges and the coping mechanism. But again, the findings were actually reported based on the themes being gathered using the data analysis that I did. So it's not more on the case-to-case basis, just like what we do with the case study. But this time here, I focus more on the experiences, more on the description of the experiences which are common among the participants. Yes, Doc. Okay. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Sir Gistoni, for the question. So, research framework is basically um, will help us on how to draft our questions or to enhance our questions, because theoretical framework is where we actually would later on compare our findings and even our questions, because it is where our problems would rest from. So the framework, the theoretical framework, will be our basis of the important theories, of the important concepts that we are actually expecting from our participants. So for example, on the 21st century skills and the K-12 curriculum and the fourth industrial revolution and the rest, these are actually what is expected of the students. But because of the experiences of our participants, questions were drafted based on this theory, which are actually seems contrary and actually give insight to to the researcher in trying to enhance the research study. Look, what I did, I used the theoretical framework only as my mental guide as to drafting my question or understanding more of the context, or in trying to describe the answer of my participants. So they serve as my guide in trying to understand better the participants' experiences. Mm-hmm. Yes, yes, Doc. Very.